Let's dive right into this explainer. It's funny, we often assume the collective consensus of watch enthusiasts is practically bulletproof, right? When a new release drops, you've got thousands of collectors, journalists, and dealers weighing in, like, instantly. But what happens when that herd mentality completely misses the mark? Today, we're taking a cinematic journey through the premium luxury watch market. We're going to look at detailed analysis, collector opinions, and real-world performance to uncover the true masterpieces that completely defy their early critics.
Every so often, a watch arrives that is misunderstood, only for time to completely rewrite the narrative. That quote really hits the nail on the head. It's kind of hard to imagine today, especially when you consider the astronomical value and real-world performance of the timepieces we're about to cover. We are talking about absolute grails of the industry here. But believe it or not, some of the most highly coveted watches in modern history were initially written off as complete disappointments, or just downright weird. But, as you'll see, time is the ultimate judge.
Act 1. The 1970s Steel Shockwave.
So picture the 1970s. The quartz revolution is absolutely tearing through the industry, and high-end Swiss houses are practically scrambling to stay relevant. This chaos led to some pretty radical designs that literally shocked the market. Case in point, Gerald Genta's legendary designs, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus. When the Royal Oak dropped in '72, with that crazy bezel looking like a vintage dive helmet, it cost a mind-boggling 3,300 Swiss francs. To put that into perspective, this stainless steel sports watch actually cost more than a solid gold Patek dress watch at the time. No way, right? Dealers pushed back hard and collectors were totally stunned. The Nautilus ran into the exact same wall in '76. It was criticized for being too big, way too expensive, and early sales were an absolute snooze fest. But contrast that early outrage with their reality today. They have totally transcended watchmaking, achieving pop culture dominance. They are the absolute pinnacle of the integrated sports genre, completely unobtainable.
And then there's Vacheron Constantin, the third member of the Holy Trinity. Talk about an agonizingly bumpy road trying to capture this exact same market. Back in 1977, they launched a 222. Honestly, it was a super interesting design, but it was basically ignored and then scrapped in under a decade. They tried again in '96 with the Overseas. Modest success, sure, but it lacked the sheer heat of its rivals. By 2004, the second generation Overseas got hammered by critics for being too bulky. And then, inexplicably, even when the stunning third generation debuted in 2016 with all these great modern refinements, it just sat there, literally gathering dust on dealer shelves.
But then, 2020 happens. The global pandemic totally shifted perspectives overnight, sparking an absolute frenzy for integrated steel, sports watches. Suddenly, it's like collectors finally woke up to the phenomenal value and craftsmanship of Vacheron. The blue dial Overseas 4500V, it's skyrocketed, hitting trading values well north of $50,000. Oh, and that original ignored 222? When they reintroduced it in 2022, it came back as a massive cult favorite, instantly trading 50% above retail. Wild.
Act 2. Misunderstood technical genius.
It's genuinely fascinating how early market ignorance or even just geographic prejudice can completely blindside us to absolute masterstrokes. Take Francois-Paul Journet. The guy literally proved two movements naturally synchronize via acoustic resonance, and collectors, they just thought it was a quirky dual time zone watch. Or Grand Seiko, they dropped the trailblazing spring drive tech, and purists instantly wrote it off the second they heard the word quartz. And then you've got A. Zone, literally resurrecting high-end German horology from the ashes of the Cold War, only for Swiss-biased collectors to just cross their arms and take a highly skeptical wait-and-see approach.
Well, that skepticism for A. So on completely shattered in 1999 when the datograph dropped. The exquisite in-house caliber L95.1 was an absolute triumph of micromechanics. Legendary watchmaker Philippe Dufour famously called it the best chronograph movement ever made. And keep in mind, the big Swiss houses at the time were comfortably coasting on older derived calibers. The datograph was a huge wake-up call. It forced the Swiss giants to scramble, roll up their sleeves, and finally build their own modern in-house chronographs.
Going back to F. Vacheron for a second, their journey from slow sales to high art status is nothing short of incredible. Ironically, they launched the time-only chronometer blue back in 2009 as an entry-level response to the financial crisis. Today, it's impossibly hyped. But the brand's true meteoric rise was cemented in 2025 at a Philips auction. A unique prototype owned by the legendary director Francis Ford Coppola, which actually used a mechanical hand to indicate the time, sold for a staggering $10.755 million. At the time, that was the highest result ever for an independent brand.
And we definitely can't forget Grand Seiko. Today, they're an international luxury powerhouse, right? Loved for their unbelievable value for money, that immaculate, mirror-like Zaratu polishing, and those insane textured dials. But for decades, they were completely misunderstood. Born in Japan in 1960 to compete with the Swiss chronometers, they stayed a mysterious legend for a long time. Even when the iconic Snowflake made its quiet international debut in 2010, people just wrongfully labeled it as an expensive Seiko. It really wasn't until 2017, when they spun off as an independent entity, and 2018 when they opened that flagship boutique right in New York City, that global demand finally exploded.
Act 3. Shaking off the stigma. Look, some brands have to fight tooth and nail to escape their early critical reputations. Take Louis Vuitton. For years, their watchmaking was totally dismissed by serious collectors. People just saw them as a fashion brand riding their own coattails, slapping outsourced quartz movements into designer cases. But behind the scenes, LV was meticulously plotting a massive high horology pivot. In 2011, they acquired the prestigious La Fabrique de Temps master workshop in Geneva. Fast forward to 2023, and they completely revamped the tambour line with the objectively stunning Caliber LFT 023 micro-rotor movement. Throw in a high-profile collaboration with the esteemed independent house Acrivia, and Louis Vuitton successfully shredded that fashion accessory stigma, demanding real, legitimate respect in the watch world.
On the total opposite side of the spectrum, you have the British independent brand Christopher Ward. When they launched in 2005, things were agonizingly slow. We're talking practically zero sales. For over a decade, they were basically just seen as a decent micro brand, mostly known for endless, spirited forum debates over their constantly changing logo. But in 2022, bam, they drop an unexpected hero product, the Bel Canto. This chiming watch set a completely new benchmark for what the brand could achieve, and it transformed public opinion literally overnight. That single hit vaulted them toward top 50 Swiss watch industry status, hitting a reported $45 million in sales for the 2025 fiscal year. What a turnaround.
Now, sometimes a stigma comes simply from replacing a legend. Let's talk Seiko. In 2019, they made the highly controversial call to discontinue the SKX. This was a beloved, true dive watch with a 23-year run, an absolute rite of passage for collectors. And they replaced it with the 5KX. On paper, it looked like a total downgrade. It only had 100 meters of water resistance and completely ditched the screw-down crown. The enthusiast reaction was fierce. Guys, I'm talking comical outrage, intense backlash, and just ridiculous secondary market price spikes for the old SKX model. But here's the thing. Context and real-world performance is absolutely everything. Despite getting caught in the crossfire of the SKX being axed, the 5KX was never actually meant to be a professional diver. As Seiko expanded the line with fresh styles like GMTs and field watches, the broader market spoke up, and they spoke loudly. By 2026, completely shaking off all that initial on-paper criticism, the 5KX had become the absolute best-selling automatic watch under $500.
Act 4. The ultimate late bloomer.
Okay, so even the absolute kings of the industry can stumble, which leads us to our climax, arguably the most unobtainable luxury watch in the world today. It is mind-blowing to think about, but the modern Rolex Daytona, you know, the one worn by superstars, the undisputed crown jewel of modern steel sports watches, was a massive commercial failure for decades. Starting with the pre-Daytona in '55 and the official Cosmograph in '63, these manual wind chronographs literally languished, completely unsold on dealer shelves for years. Even when the Daytona name was slapped on the dial in '65, sales were disastrously poor. It actually wasn't until they modernized the tech, eventually dropping their own in-house Caliber 4130 in the year 2000, that the modern era of the Daytona finally began to take its current shape.
And this perfectly illustrates the real turning point for the model's prestige. European collectors started noticing that movie star and competitive racer Paul Newman wore a Daytona. Ironically, his was the even less popular exotic black-on-white Panda dial variant. Fast forward to 2017, and Paul Newman's actual personal Daytona goes up for auction and sells for over $17 million. That single event sent the vintage collecting community into the stratosphere, which directly turbocharged the unrivaled desirability of the modern, contemporary Daytonas we see today.
Act 5. Time rewrites the truth.
As we wrap up this explainer, let's zoom out a bit. The core takeaways here for collectors and enthusiasts are pretty clear. The initial reception of a timepiece rarely, if ever, defines its permanent legacy. Groundbreaking avant-garde design naturally shocks the system before it becomes a standard of success. True technical innovation, like acoustic resonance or spring drive, well, that just requires patience for the market to catch up. Ultimately, whether you're investing or just collecting for pure passion, the herd consensus isn't always right. True value, both in horological mechanics and market appreciation, requires the patience to let time reveal the full story.
Which brings us to the most exciting part of this entire journey. I want you to look around at the current market. Look at the releases getting totally roasted on the forums right now, or the ones languishing in display cases. What dismissed watch today is tomorrow's ultimate million-dollar grail. Keep your eyes open because history proves the watch world is bound to get it wrong again. Thanks for joining me on this Explainers, and I'll catch you in the next one.